1954, Edinburgh, 2:30 in the afternoon. The teapot sits in the exact centre of the table. Beside it, a milk jug, a sugar bowl, a small plate of thinly sliced lemon. The sandwiches have been cut into triangles, crusts removed, every piece the same size. The scones, still warm from the oven, are covered with a linen cloth. The handles of the porcelain cups all face the same direction. The hostess is seated, but she hasn't poured the tea yet, because that isn't her role. Not yet. The guest is on her way, she will sit in a particular chair, the tea will be poured in a particular order, milk first or tea first, even that is a rule, and everyone in that room knows these rules without ever discussing them, without anyone ever writing them down. Her name is Rosemary. She lives in a small but well-ordered house in the north of Edinburgh. Every Thursday afternoon she invites her neighbours for tea, no invitation card, no telephone call, simply a known day at a known hour. And the tea she serves has 10 unwritten rules that haven't changed in 20 years. Not one of them appears in any book, but everyone knew them. From their mothers, from their mothers' mothers. Today you say to someone, let's have a cup of tea, a tea bag, a mug, 2 minutes. And the difference between these two things isn't simply a difference in time, it is the disappearance of a ritual, of a slowing down, of being completely present in a room. This video is about the 10 rules of that ritual. The 7th one surprised me most when I was researching this. The 10th has since been confirmed by science and not just in the context of tea. If learning about these traditions interests you, subscribe and let's begin. Rule 1. The hour was always 3 o'clock. 1954, Edinburgh. Thursday. When Rosemary woke that morning, 3 o'clock was already in her mind. She didn't schedule anything else for that hour. She didn't move her errands to that slot. She didn't allow the afternoon to drift past it. Tea was at 3 o'clock. Across England and Scotland, this was an understanding. The tradition begun by Anna, Duchess of Bedford in the 1840s, had become so thoroughly embedded that by Rosemary's time, nobody asked why 3. It simply was. When I first began researching this, I noticed something. The fixed hour wasn't a restriction. It was a kind of freedom. The rest of the day shaped itself around that hour. An anchor, a point of pause. Today we say, let's have tea with no hour attached. Half an hour from now, 2 hours perhaps, uncertain. And that uncertainty, more often than not, means it never happens at all. Rosemary's tea was at 3 o'clock. For 20 years, it never once slipped. Rule 2. The guest always had the best chair. Rosemary's sitting room had 2 armchairs. One was beside the window. The light came in well, the view was pleasant, the cushion was full. The other was closer to the wall, slightly firmer, slightly darker. Rosemary always sat in the one by the wall. The guests sat by the window, without being asked, without discussion. This was the first unwritten rule of British and Scottish hospitality. The guest comes first in every matter of comfort. The best chair, the best plate, the largest scone, the first serving. When I first thought about this, it seemed like a simple matter of manners. Then I realized it was something rather deeper. Every Thursday, by choosing the less comfortable chair, Rosemary was making a decision. This hour was not for her, it was for her guest. And that single choice changed the atmosphere of the entire room. Rule 3. The teapot came to the table, not the guests to the kitchen. Rosemary made the tea in the kitchen, but she didn't leave the teapot there. The teapot came to the table, the cups were already at the table, the milk jug was at the table, everything was at the table. This wasn't simply a practical arrangement. Having the teapot at the table meant the hostess never needed to excuse herself. She wasn't getting up and disappearing to fetch something. The conversation was never interrupted. In 1950s British and Scottish tea etiquette, leaving a guest unattended was considered quite rude, particularly if the first guest to arrive had not yet finished her cup. Today we entertain guests and we're constantly getting up, something from the kitchen, something else from a cupboard, and with each departure the conversation breaks, the rhythm is lost, and we find ourselves saying, now where were we? Rosemary never rose from the table she had set, because she had thought of everything in advance, down to the smallest detail. Rule 4. Milk first, or tea first. In Rosemary's home, milk came first. A small measure of milk into the cup first, then the tea poured over it. This was known in British and Scottish tea culture as myth, milk in first, and the preference carried a social meaning. Pouring the tea first and adding milk afterwards suggested the porcelain cup was of a quality that could withstand the heat, in other words, an expensive cup. Milk first, then tea, was safer for more ordinary china. Over time, that social meaning faded, but the habit remained. Rosemary put the milk in first because her mother had. Her mother had done the same because she had learned it the same way. While researching this, I came across George Orwell's 1946 essay, A Nice Cup of Tea. In it, Orwell set out 11 rules for making tea, and on the question of milk, he took a firm position: tea first, then milk. When the essay was published, it caused a small but genuine debate across England, because this was a matter people took seriously: the order of milk in a cup of tea. Taken seriously. If you've been watching this and thinking, my grandmother did exactly this, or my mother still does, please do send this video to her, or watch it together. Sometimes the kindest thing you can give someone is a reminder. Rule 5. Savory first, sweet after. There was always an order at Rosemary's tea table. Savory first, sweet after. Thinly cut, crustless sandwiches came first. Cucumber and butter, perhaps a sliver of smoked salmon, then the scones, then the cake. This order wasn't arbitrary. The tradition that came down from the Victorian era rested on practical reasoning. Savory food opens the appetite and prepares the stomach. Sweet food satisfies and slows. When eaten in this sequence, the tea naturally lengthens, slows, and becomes a proper occasion in itself. Today you go to a gathering and there might be a bowl of biscuits, perhaps some crisps, perhaps nothing at all. No order, no ritual. Rosemary's table had an order, and that order determined how the whole afternoon felt. Rule 6. The second cup was offered without being asked. After Rosemary had poured her guests tea, she turned her attention to the conversation. When the cup had gone down to roughly half, Rosemary would refill it, without asking, without saying, would you like more? This was an important nuance in British and Scottish hospitality. Asking could place the guest in an awkward position. Am I waiting for the right moment to say no? Would saying yes seem too eager? The way to remove that small social friction was for the hostess to simply decide, but the third cup was different. The third cup was offered with a question, because by then it was no longer the hostess's decision, it was the guest's preference. This distinction seems small, but it changed the ease of the whole room. The guest wasn't wondering when the next offer would come, the cup was simply filled and the conversation continued to flow. Rule 7, scone, jam first, then cream. This rule always made Rosemary smile a little. In the southwest of England, in Cornwall and Devon, cream goes on the scone first, then jam. In the rest of England and across Scotland, it's jam first, then cream. This was known as the Cream Tea Wars, and it was no small thing. A survey conducted in the 2010s found that 60% of people in England held a strong personal preference on the matter. In Rosemary's home, the order was jam first, then cream. That was how it was done in Edinburgh. If one of her guests happened to come from Cornwall, which was rare, Rosemary would apply her own order, gently but without question. When I was researching this, I realized something. The fact that this argument has continued for so long says a great deal. For those people, every detail of the ritual mattered. It was thought about, it was cared about. Today, nobody particularly minds what goes on a scone first, mostly because there often isn't a scone at all. Rule 8. Tea lasted exactly 1 hour. Rosemary's tea began at 3 o'clock and ended at 4. A guest didn't leave before 4, that would seem rushed, a slight to the hostess, but she didn't linger much past 4 either. That would risk tiring the household. 1 hour. Exactly. I find this framework fascinating when I think about it today, because having an endpoint actually made the hour more valuable. Since the close was known, the beginning could be entered into fully. Nobody was half watching the clock. Nobody was calculating how much longer to stay. Today, social visits are open-ended. The start uncertain, the finish uncertain, and that uncertainty paradoxically lowers the quality of the time itself. The women in Rosemary's sitting room were entirely present for 1 hour, completely and without reservation. Rule 9. Some topics were left outside. Rosemary avoided certain subjects during tea. Money, illness, politics, Any ongoing dispute involving neighbours. This too was an unwritten rule. Tea was not the time for heavy matters. The weather, the garden, a book recently read, news from the children's school, a small plan for a trip somewhere. This might seem superficial to us today, but it was actually a very deliberate choice. Tea was not the heaviest hour of the day, it was the lightest. A place to breathe, and to protect that breathing space, certain things were kept outside the door. I tried this once. At a gathering, I didn't put my phone on the table, I didn't talk about the news, I didn't talk about work, only small, light, gentle things. I left that gathering far more rested than I expected, because I had discovered something Rosemary already knew. Rule 10. There were no telephones at the tea table. In 1954, this rule didn't need stating. There was no telephone at the table because there was no such thing as a portable telephone. Rosemary's telephone was in the hallway. If it rang during tea, which it rarely did, she either didn't rise at all, or she said, "Excuse me, just one moment," and returned within seconds. That table, for the full hour, belonged entirely to the people sitting at it. Today, this requires a conscious decision. In Rosemary's time, it wasn't a rule at all. It was simply how life was arranged. But the result is the same. The people at that table were entirely connected to one another. There was nowhere else for their attention to go. Research has shown that a visible telephone on a table, even switched off, even face down, reduces the depth of conversation and the quality of connection simply by being present. Rosemary didn't know any of that, of course. The telephone simply wasn't at the table, because the telephone wasn't at the table. When I look at these 10 rules together, I notice something. Not one of them was really a rule at all. Nobody had given Rosemary a list. Nobody had told her, do this, don't do that. These were simply an accumulation, things passed down from generation to generation, never questioned, because they were plainly seen to work. And beneath all of them was a single idea. This hour is special. This hour belongs only to itself. The people at this table are worth this table. Working through this research, I found myself thinking the same thing again and again. Perhaps the problem isn't that the tea party disappeared. Perhaps the problem is that what was inside it, the framework, the stillness, the feeling of being completely present, disappeared with it. And to bring that back requires only a teapot, 2 cups, and 3 o'clock. This week, arrange a tea, just 1 hour, no telephone, in the right order, at 3 o'clock precisely. Then come back and write in the comments, how did it feel? I read every single comment. Everyone. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do hit the bell, and I'll find you when the next video is ready.